All right, good evening. My name is Stu Wallace, and I'm on the Wings of Knowledge Committee. And tonight we have a special program. It's a CJ I think it's the first CJ program we've done. And it's a CJ program entitled Coffee with the Cop. I left the donut out.
That's all right, that's all right.
But anyway, this is a program which helps the police in the town and the residents of the town get on the same page. And you can always come up with examples of where they weren't on the same page, where the community and the police force were maybe on two different planets or whatever. But I don't need to tell you too much about that because we have Ferguson to talk about, and clearly some people weren't on the same page there. This has been a dilemma for police worldwide. It's been a dilemma here in that how do you get the police and the people in the community working together and not running away from each other. And so this is a program, I think it's national in scope.
It is.
That has finally come to New Hampshire, and we're lucky to have Chief Sartell, who does also adjunct work here, as well as the Chief of the Hollis Police Department, talk about Coffee with the Cop. So I'll turn it over to you.
Sure.
You're on.
So my name is James Sartell. I think I do know a few of you in the audience.
I'm going to ask you to sign.
Just a little bit about me before I get started. As he had said, I'm the Chief of Police in Hollis, New Hampshire. It's as far south as you can go before you're in Massachusetts. We're still free down that way, so you are still in New Hampshire. I can tell you that, no doubt. I have my undergrad here, so I feel like I'm kind of a little bit of a homecoming with the night atmosphere here. I kind of like it. This is where I got my start as far as that. I was not a conventional college student. I went to NHTI, got my associate's degree. I was working at the Department of Corrections at the time, at the state prison over here. I kind of turned that into going to Franklin Pierce University, where I got my bachelor's, again a night student, and I got my master's a few years back from Boston University. Right about the time I was fixing to try and get promoted, the prior police chief didn't think I needed to get my master's. I kind of said it's a business plan, and I had it all in my head that I needed to do it, and that's kind of how it went. I got involved in college and the adjunct work because I was frustrated as someone who was in charge of hiring processes at my department with the quality of college student that we would see. And I can remember, like it was yesterday, sitting across from somebody that's got $70,000 in student loans who couldn't stumble through an interview and give me just 2 or 3 talking points on the principle of community policing, for instance. And it would be, oh my gosh. And then I would look on their resume and gosh darn it, it'd be one of the colleges I went to. How does this work? So at first I kind of got involved with alumni associations and stuff, and I would come in and do career day kind of speaking and that type of thing. And I started to think that I could probably do a little bit more work if I was more involved in the delivery of content. So I got some opportunities to teach, and I've done that ever since. So that's my kind of story. I do some adjunct work for a number of different institutions. I do bricks and mortar here. I teach at Southern New Hampshire University on occasion, and I also do some adjunct work down at Boston University at the grad level, which is kind of nice. So I like it because it gives me the opportunity to impact at the associate's level, the bachelor's level, and then at the grad level where it becomes a little bit more difficult and you're dealing with practitioners in the field, and I really enjoy that part of it too. So I try to give back when I can, and that's kind of one of the ways I do it. So just for a quick agenda for tonight, I'm not sure how long you folks usually stay. This is the kind of a presentation that kind of takes on a life of its own depending on the crowd. Sometimes I'll get questions completely unrelated and we'll go off on a tangent and I'll talk police work until the cows come home. So for me, I don't feel like I'm working, and we could stop here and go over to Pizza Hut and have the conversation all night. So for me, I think I geared it to probably about an hour. I've got 10 or 11 slides. I'm not a big PowerPoint guy. I like to just do this kind of thing, come down and sit next to you type of thing. It's just my way. But I figured we'll do an intro. I think it's very difficult to talk about Coffee with a Cop without kind of doing a broader overview of what community policing is and what we're actually trying to do. You need a roadmap a little bit, but you need a destination. This is a stop along the way to the destination, which is better communication with the community you serve. So I look at it that way. So we'll talk a little bit about the underpinnings of community policing, what it actually means that we're trying to do. And then I'll give you an overview of the program, and I'll open up for any questions. And by all means, please pipe in with any questions as we go. But to get started, I think you have to start at where we're at. And we're talking and chatting with a couple people prior to the getting set up with the presentation. And no matter when you would have this conversation, we could have had this conversation 365 days ago. And there might not have been a Ferguson, as big of a news story, but you can bet your bottom dollar and rest assured there was a story last year, 365 days ago. And had I thought of it, and if I was a little sharper, I would have looked at the newspapers 365 days ago and told you that that story is. But I will guarantee you there was a story, either a use of force. I mean, Eric Holder is the Attorney General, so there was definitely a story between law enforcement and the public kind of clashing. I'm not a very supportive Attorney General, I think, from that perspective of helping us with our community relations. So you can rest assured. I'm not a smart guy. I've had to work harder than everybody to get where I am. I truly think that. So for me, I try to be different and I try and follow the directions. And like most guys, I don't like to stop and ask for directions. I can find my way. But I finally learned that I need to look for directions. So when I look at the problems facing us in 2015, and I think if this was a bigger room and if we were in a seminar environment, I would ask out and we'd write them all on the board over here. What are some of them? We have disconnect with the community. We don't communicate properly with our constituents. We don't listen to our constituents. We spend too much money. Unions are too strong. We'd have all these issues that we would come up with in this little spot here, right? We talk a lot about it in the class, about the same kind of thing. What are the issues facing us? Well, one, I'm not that guy that thinks the government's the solution to every problem, because I truly and honestly don't believe that that's the way that the government was created and what it was created to do. So when I sit back as an executive, I say, is this a problem that I can handle, and how would I handle it? I start by looking, what's my purpose here? You know, that purpose-driven kind of approach to it. And I start all my classes, anybody that's ever had me as a student, we start right here. How do we know what the function of government even is to begin with? Where do we get that concept? We're Americans. Where do we get the concept?
Constitution.
Declaration of Independence. Yes. Yep. We get it because we actually deliberated about what is the purpose of government. Why do we even have a government? The government we currently have, meaning the King of England, is oppressive. We don't have representation. We do not have a say in the way the government works. What is the purpose of government? Again, we're in the United States. We do not believe in kings and queens. We do not believe that somebody bestows upon you the worldly treasures of understanding how the world should work. That's not what we believe in. So I look at it from a perspective of I need to look in what is our purpose of government to determine whether or not I can even approach the issues that we've identified. So the first thing I look at is why? Well, we secure rights by the consent of the governed, one, right? You can unpack this for a whole college semester, right? There's no question about this. But look it down. For what? To secure rights given to us by our Creator, right? Those rights are deliberated here, and we talk about at the end. So we're structuring government so that it will affect our safety and happiness. I look back at these issues and say, yeah, darn right, this is a spot for government. There's no question about this. Not something you can privatize. This was exactly what the Founding Fathers created the government for. Good, we're in, right? So then I say, I run a police department. What is the core mission of a police department? Where do I get that idea of policing in a free society? Where does that come from? Well, the Metropolitan Police System that we now enjoy was created in the 1800s by a man named Sir Robert Peel from England. Any criminal justice major, if they cannot summarize at least a few of his points, wasn't paying attention in class, didn't show up, showed up stoned, I don't know what to tell you. They have a crappy program, I don't know what to tell you, but this is where it all starts. You give me a police issue on a national level or a local level, and I will identify exactly which principle we either fail to adhere to or we need to work harder at adhering to. It's 100% of the time, not 99%, 100% of the time. So for the purposes of this particular issue, I look at our issue largely communication, learning what the town wants from us. We want the consent of the governed to run this department the way that they would like to see it run and to improve their quality of life. So I look at the principles involved in that process. One, our basic mission is to prevent crime and disorder. Pretty simple. Everybody knows that. Protect and serve. Right? That's been on the side of police cruisers, gosh, since before my time, I can tell you that, right? The ability for police to perform their duties is dependent on public approval. We already know that. That's the underpinnings of our very democracy, right? There's no question about that. We're still on the same page. We must secure the willing cooperation, right? It's got to be a willing thing. It's not so we can drive on the highway, and I feel comfortable driving here at 65 because I'm pretty sure most of us are going to drive the same way we're supposed to. If I had any doubt that there wasn't voluntary compliance, that people are going to all be driving the same way at 65, I'm not getting up on that highway, right? There's got to be voluntary compliance. It cannot function without it. Charles Barkley made some comments about this thing in Ferguson. He made very similar comments about patrolling neighborhoods. There has to be voluntary compliance. And the next principle I think that really takes hold is this one. And those of you that have had me for students, I think I see a couple, know that I'll beat this into the ground. And I like to read it as it is because it really is rich. And it's hard to summarize properly. But police at all times should maintain a relationship with the public that gives reality to the historic tradition that the police are the public and the public are the police. The police being only members of the public who are paid to give full-time attention to duties which are already incumbent on every citizen in the interest of community welfare and existence. I'm not doing anything special. I'm not doing anything that you wouldn't do. I'm just paid to do it. You know why? Because I'm not as smart as you and I can't make a living doing anything else. I can't make anything. I'm a wreck over here, right? This is what I can do. Right? But all of us need to do. When you see a kid breaking bottles at the beach, you don't need a policeman to tell him to knock it off. If you wait for the policeman to tell him to knock it off, somebody's going to get cut. And it's going to be your little girl, right? It's incumbent upon all of us to maintain this type of community welfare in existence, right? So now I've kind of got my bearings. It's a government issue, no question. We got that. I got my marching orders from Sir Robert Peel that I still think are as vibrant and as rich as they were the day they were written. So it's morphed into, 200 years later, almost, right? It's morphed into what we decide is community policing, or what we define as community policing. I would be horrified if you have a CJ degree, or if you have any interest in law enforcement, if you can't summarize the concept of community policing. We'll make it very easy over time, because this is the academic, pointy-headed way of talking about it, right? It's a philosophy focused on general neighborhood problems as a source of crime, right? And it's community policing is preventative, proactive, and information-based. So what we're trying to do is, one, we're recognizing that neighborhood problems are crime, right? And that we need to prevent crime, be proactive in preventing crime, and get our strategies by information. Not just, I feel like patrolling this area. Well, what are you basing that on? Where is that coming from? How am I matching up my resources at my department with the town's crime needs, right? And if I'm out there thinking, I send all my guys to human trafficking education, and I have a big initiative of human trafficking, and all my guys are geared up to prevent human trafficking in Hollis, New Hampshire? What? Right? No, I got to match up the needs of the town of Hollis, right? That's the way it kind of works. How do I do that? Right? So let's unpack it a little bit. Neighborhood problems as a source of crime, check. We understand that, right? We need to be preventive, proactive, and information-based, right? So how do I get information about the neighborhood problems? Sure.
When you say neighborhood problems as a source of crime, how do you mean that? How do you assess that? What do you look for in order to make that assessment?
That's exactly the crux of the issue, isn't it? If we know the source of crime is problems in neighborhoods, and we can expand the concept of neighborhoods to communities, problems in the community turn into crime. How do I get that? Where do I, exactly like he says, where am I getting this? If you go to a mansion and you're at a party, it's the summertime, you got to go to the bathroom, and the little guy that lives there, his 4-year-old is there, and you have to go to the bathroom, you have no idea when the mansion to go, where are you going to ask? It's okay to ask the little 4-year-old where the bathroom is, right? He knows where the bathroom is. You might be smarter than him. You might be more trained than him. Heck, you're making a whole lot more money than him. He lives in that big house, so probably not for very long. But the fact is, he's the guy that has the info. So where do I go to understand neighborhood problems? The neighborhood. Right? Now we got to expand that concept because we think of neighborhood as Mr. Rogers' little neighborhood and the 7 houses that are strung together, or the cookie cutters in Hudson or wherever we live, right? Neighborhood, we're talking about the larger aggregate of community. And we have to use residents and stakeholders, not just residents, because we're talking about business owners, we're talking about educators, we're talking about people, craftsmen, people that are vendors, contractors, I mean, on and on and on in society, right? So communicate with residents and stakeholders. That's how we find out where the neighborhood problems are. Next thing is, what do we do with the information? Now we have it, what do? I train up a bunch of guys for human trafficking, right? That's the way that'll work. Well, wait a second, I didn't tell you that. I told you the kids are skipping stones into the windows at the dugouts down at the baseball field, urinating in the dugouts. We have to go in and have our baseball game Saturday morning, and that's what my kids walk into. It's a quality of life issue. I can tell you from my experiences that what's going to happen is that is going to degrade to a point where they're not just urinating in there anymore. They're going to burn it down, and someone's going to get hurt. I've seen it play out before. I can catch it when it's small, which is exactly what I'd like to do. I'd rather not follow the fire trucks to the Little League, right? Or like happened in Goffstown, when they break in and they steal everybody's equipment, $100,000 in baseball equipment and money that they've raised to go to Cooperstown Dreams. When I had somebody had the information that said, things are getting bad down there. There's a group of kids that are kind of a little off the... Now, do I want to wait? No, I want to get it close. I want a proactive, right, information-based kind of technique towards this problem. So, again, you're asked in an interview, what is community policing? Talking to people and then using this department stuff to fix the problem. You just hit a grand slam right out, oof, way out in center field. Because I can't tell you how many educated people could sit in front of me that have devoted their whole adult life, which is 4 years long, into the study of criminal justice that cannot answer the question even as rudimentary as I just did. It's a simple concept, very, very simple. Communicate with the people that you're providing service to. Every salesman in the room is like, yeah, well, are you kidding me? You couldn't sell anything if you didn't. It's the way it works, right? So the problem with that concept is the most times that we're interacting with the public, it's under circumstances that are less than desirable. Not exactly conducive to sharing our thoughts about, hey, what do you think about the Little League? Nice place down there. They did a good job at that playground too, huh? It's outstanding. Sir, my daughter was raped. You're going to talk to me about that? Where do I interface with the average person? Or my department interface with the average person? They teach you in the police academy, and they're darn right about it. Your interaction with that person is the 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 times they're ever going to even talk to a policeman, number one. And it's always going to be, not always, most of the time it's going to be at a point in time in their life that falls into one of these situations. Right? I'm there because her husband is lying about what they do with her child when he's over there for the weekend. She want to talk to me about how things are rosy in the center of town? Yeah, hey, and how do you think that whole thing is working out with the school and not being able to build a football field and all that? So what do you think? Or what do you think about the flea market? That's a big traffic thing up there. I'm really trying to get my mind wrapped around what I need to do as the police chief sir, can I bring you back over here and talk about the fact that my husband's lying and telling me that right? There's an emergency, it's adversarial, it's stressful, emotional. I mean, that's not conducive to understanding their smaller quality of life issues. They forgot about the guy urinating in the dugout, didn't they? It's not quite on the top of the list here, buddy. The dad's not bringing the kids home from Utah. That's what I'm thinking about when I talk to you, right? So let's look at some of the common community policing programs that are out there. And totally guilty that these are all the ones probably verbatim from my department, right? But we have DARE, great program. There's a bunch of different, you're gonna see so many acronyms tonight. You're not even gonna believe it. One day, the emergency manager brings in a book. He has a big book, it's this thick. And it's from the federal government, and it is a book on acronyms. These are the acronyms, this is the key for the acronyms used by the federal government. It's this thick. It's unbelievable, ungodly. You never see anything like me. But I'm gonna use a bunch of them, so you can throw stuff, just kind of throw it that way, right? So we have DARE, we have school resource officers, we have the Police Athletic League, we've got our neighborhood watch programs, National Night Out is a big one across the country, very good programs. All these programs are good, I'm not talking them down. Citizens Police Academy, we've got a bunch of specialized units down here. We might have a bike unit. Manchester's got two horses. We've got mountain bike units. Some departments have ski mobiles. I mean, you name it, right? We'll try and do anything. We've got basketball with the cop. We've got shop with a cop. We've got all these other things, right? What's the problems where are the shortcomings that we see in some of these programs, though? A lot of them are youth-oriented. Now, how many of you were motivated to go grab the local police officer and tell them about the big kegger that's going to eventually result in the girl passing out and getting raped by 3 guys? Now, you think it's just a youthful indiscretion big keg party. I've seen the other side where I've had to tell dad what happened, after she consumes too much alcohol, falls down the stairs and busts her face up and loses her 2 front teeth or gets raped. I found the girl naked on the bed as I was breaking up a party too, prior to her getting raped. So I've been around a little bit, but how many people in the room were the first person to run to the police department and tell Officer Jones, the same guy that we had in 4th grade when they had the big officer-friendly program, remember that? The officer-friendly program was a big thing in the 1970s, right? Nah, not happening. This is not a very good source of intelligence. It is for something, but for general quality of life issues in the town, who's responsible for peeing in the dugout would be your guess. Who is suspect number 1? Why do we always think kids do it? Because they do. Right? Honestly? It's like it's 80-something% of the smaller crimes are committed by youth. It's a fact. It's not something we can really argue about, right? So the youth-oriented, there's some weaknesses in that. Not entirely useless, don't get me wrong. Relationships established in here, I can't even begin to tell you the value. Our school resource officer has touched more lives in the town of Hollis than I hope I got half of them. I mean, the friendships and personal relationships developed in that relationship, I can't even begin to speak of. I coach baseball. I'm a big baseball guy. I'm actually going to take the JV team again now that my son's out of Little League. I can start to coach real baseball again, which is kind of nice. And I did that for years. And my next-door neighbor, I coached his 30-year-old son. When he was a kid in high school, we still keep in touch. I still email him. I've had a lot of touching moments with people as a result of my time up there. I was never an SRO, but I coached a bunch of youth baseball. So the relationships made in here are nothing to shake a stick at, and I hope that I don't come across that way. But they do have their limitations. They're irregularly scheduled. There's not a lot of continuity to it. National Night Out is 1 night a week. I think it's in October, if anybody remembers. It's right around October. I think it's right around Halloween, right? These things are kind of based on a calendar. DARE is an annual program targeted to 5th graders, depending on what community you live in. I mean, really? Mrs. Jones, you know what she does? Mrs. Jones has about as much intelligence. I mean, gosh darn it, right? It's like I give a big drug talk at the high school. Who are all the people that attend? The people that are in the PTO. The people that are totally on top of their kids, man. They don't need to be there. Who needs to be there is the lady that's leaving her children at home until 8 o'clock at night. It's working 2 jobs, trying to make a living, and doesn't understand the signs and symptoms of drug abuse. She in my crowd? No, unfortunately not. That's part of the problem, right? These are people that I'm preaching to the choir here. These people already understand and are already a kind of a conduit to us. And the problem with getting our information from the same place all the time is if you were to talk to Al Sharpton, you're going to get a specific point of view. No? Might not always be wrong. It's wrong a lot. But it might not always be wrong. But you know darn well what his issue is going to be. It's one issue person. If you talk to a pro-life person, you're going to get a one-issue voter. And if that's the only place you get your information from, you might make a mountain out of a molehill. And the old saying is the juice worth the squeeze type of thing. I need to understand the broader spectrum. I can't listen to the squeaky wheel and think it's my biggest problem when the brakes in the car have been cut, right? So I have to diversify where I get my information from. We're also talking about, in these issues here, these people are concerned about violent crime. They're thinking about broad, really criminal issues in nature. And I'm talking about trying to find things before they erupt into crime. So I'm really over here. I really want to find out about those small quality of life issues. You hearing that way out in the back of the baseball field. Now, Mrs. Jones, now when do you hear that? The Friday and Saturday nights. Oh, they're I'll tell you, they're tearing up. Well, it's interesting because on the other side of the field, I know we've got the baseball fields, and I've seen the porta potties turned over a couple times. I've seen that in the log a couple times. Wednesday nights, Thursday nights, where are you? That's the type of discussion I'm looking to find and to have, right? Not necessarily about robberies or something. And Snazzy Tools, the answer? Some of these specialized units. I mean, I'm from Manchester. I grew up in a housing project in Manchester. I went to high school on the west side. Love Manchester. One of the what do you call a horse officer? I want to call him a horse officer, but that's not what it is. What is it? Equestrian guy? Mounted, yeah, mounted. You see, you're in. I'm a clueless over here. Yeah, one of these mounted officers is a very good friend of mine. We went to high school together. We graduated together. We worked first few years as rookies together. Worked very closely on the job together. I don't want to spend one single solitary dollar on that program that's not funded by grants or by private donations, because I don't understand how we have an agency in the Northeast that's constantly telling us there's 70 guys short that have a couple guys on horses that are going to the Deerfield Fair. I have a problem with that, personally. The other thing I look at these snazzy tools is how many of them stay after the grant funding runs out. How many of those snowmobiles really stayed? It's that whole bridge to nowhere discussion, right? If I say we're going to build a bridge and it's going to go from here to nowhere, you're in for 500, you're in for 500, you're in for 500, right? What? No. But if I say, hey, listen, we want to build a bridge to nowhere. You'll get the job. You'll sell her the materials. They'll pay for it. We're in, right? We don't care where it goes. We're in, right? This is awesome. You're getting paid. He's supplying you. Everybody's in except for these folks. But they're paying for it. Once the grant money runs out, they really need the sidewalk, safe routes to school. If the town of Brookline needed that sidewalk, they would have funded it a long time ago. They don't want it. They want it now because the money's free from the feds. That's the way it works. So you can really gauge the net need and necessity of some of these specialized units as when the grant funding runs out. How supportive are they of the program? When they let that snowmobile go right down the road and sold it right back to Johnny when it was done. So there's some limitations here. Now, specialized units do have a purpose. Those of you that have had me before know that I do recommend highly some of these specialized units for purposes of community relations. They're very good, especially patrolling the trails, patrolling parks. Mountain bike is I can't even begin to tell you how much crime and issues we have nipped in the bud with these specialized units. Very good units. So you look at where does Coffee with a Cop fit in? Well, we looked at some of the limitations. I'll look at the benefits of this. But first, it started in California, Hawthorne, California Police Department. Google the department, fairly busy little place, very urban, or fairly urban, maybe not very for California standards, but certainly for New Hampshire would be urban. It's designed to create an environment that's inviting and comfortable for you to just kind of shoot the breeze and talk about the things I've talked about. I'd like to hear about the kids raising hell out in the back of the baseball field. I'd like to hear about the guy that lets his dogs run loose up the road a little bit, because I have had experience where the dog's a pit bull and it's going to bite some girl in the face if I don't get on top of this. Find out what is the deal. It's gone after this, it's gone after that, it's terrorized the bus stop a little bit. You never heard about it, Chief? I can't believe it. That kind of stuff, right? I want to provide an atmosphere that's conducive to that type of relationship. I can do that in a couple ways. I have an open door policy for residents. They can come and make an appointment with me. I'm not very busy. I don't have a line out forming to the left when it comes to just coming and having a cup of coffee, but I do have that out there. Tell anybody that lives in the town of Halls, coffee's always on, right? But I want to provide a wide swath, and I don't want to make it an affirmative kind of thing where they've got to look me up and make that connection, right? And the primary objective here is for me to sell my resources, right? I want to advise the citizenry of the resources we already have. We do a ton of stuff at the police department. It's an outreach all the time about all kinds of different things. And I'm shocked sometimes when someone that's in that target group has never heard of it. Like, where did I go wrong? What did I forget to tell? How did I forget? Where? I've got Twitter, I've got this, I've got that. Where am I not reaching these people? How does that work? Right? So my primary objective of the officers that I have going, Lieutenant is the second in charge of my agency. He and I are always at them. Just because I think it's a small enough town that I think it warrants that, and we'll make time to go. But we always instruct the officers. Our primary objective here is to provide information about our department to residents. Listen to problems, but provide that back information and those resources to people so they know what we have to offer here. So when it comes to choosing a location for something, you want it obviously to be comfortable. You want it to be well known. You don't want it to be a hole in the wall that nobody can find, that nobody goes to anyways. Because again, it's not something that it's an affirmative thing that people are coming to specifically to talk to policemen. I want that, I just bumped into you on the way to work kind of thing. I really do. Because that spontaneity is really what I need to find out what the quality of life issues really are. If you've prepped for it, you're damn mad by then. You have a list of grievances about that issue if you've prepared to come see me. Trust me, I got appointments in the morning. You're more than welcome to pop in after they're out, and I'll give you your earful, right? So popular, access all walks of life. That's what I want. I want the landscaper. And he's like, yeah, you know that old lady that lives on such and such drive? Yeah, I've seen this red pickup pulling into their yard, in and out, in and out. I do the lady across the street, and I used to do her, but ever since her grandson's been around, I haven't had the job anymore. My wheels are turning. Whoa, we've had burglaries in that road. The elder abuse thing going on. Young nephew, how old's he? Oh boy, I'm liking this conversation a lot. And I take a lot of intelligence back about that type of issue, right? So I want to vary the days, the times, locations. I don't want to target 9:30 on Monday mornings because I'm missing you. You're in work at 7 o'clock, right? I want to do them in the evenings. I want to do them in the morning. I want to do them right before the rush. I want to do them a little bit after the rush to catch the soccer mom that's dropped the kids off and now she's just going to go and stop at Brookdale's Fruit Farm for the pies for the holiday. That's the type of spontaneity I want to try and get. So varying times and locations, a neutral ground where it's not, overly cop friendly. I was in a bait and tackle shop this weekend. My son had basketball practice in Hudson. Dropped him off to basketball practice and had a few minutes before I went to the library to do some work. And I pop into this tackle shop, and it's guys that all know each other. Norm, right? That's these guys. I don't feel comfortable in there. Because then I'm like, oh, they expect me to really buy something? Or do I feel like kind of goofy if I don't? I'm just checking stuff out and I leave? Is that kind of, how does this work? They all know each other. Can I help you? And that's not, I'm not very inviting. You don't want that, right? You want an atmosphere where you're just there. If you see someone look over at you and you just kind of introduce yourself, hey, we're here, we have a copy of the coffee. You don't have to pay for the coffee over there. You're more than welcome to ours. You don't even have to talk to us if you don't want to. I can have a nasty disposition. I wouldn't blame you. That kind of intro, you get people to kind of open up and talk to you, right? And of course, you obviously need the good coffee. Not a donut guy. I like the bagel, so if you bring bagels with light cream cheese, I'm all over it, but I'm not a big donut guy. But I'm all right. So, what are the benefits? There's a bunch of them. We're focusing on these issues. I'm not focusing on armed robberies. I'm not focusing on smash and grabs. I'm not focusing on a particular crime at hand that we've already been made aware of or that we're already trying to deal with. I'm dealing with those minor quality of life issues that are going to metamorphosize, I can tell you in no uncertain terms, into crimes at some point. Or at least that's my educated guess. Right? That's what I'm trying to prevent. That's the very core of community policing. Right? I want to find them when they're these so that they don't turn into something else. Now, I've got a couple CJ majors in the room. When I throw this up here, what am I talking about?
Smaller crimes that make the environment conducive to more serious.
There's my guy, an A student back there, I'm telling you. He's very good. He is very good. There's a way to track me during one of our tests. I gave him forgiveness over in the back here, but he did his work. Greg's a good guy. Yes, exactly. You provide an environment. If there's already spray paint on the walls and broken windows, that's the place you can set up shop. But if the minute you throw that ball through the window and you graffiti it, the next day it's all cleaned up again, that's not a place. People are looking at that place. The people are on top of the issue there and they're engaged in the community. That's not really a place for you to set up shop to continue your nonsense. So that's the general kind of approach that you're looking here. Now, if you look into the broken windows theory, and again, you could teach a college semester on the broken windows theory, it's larger in nature, very, very conducive to the urban environment, but the principles, I think, are sound. That if you show that there's a level of engagement, you're much more likely to prevent things before they happen. What do you think I mean by social issues often erupt into criminal justice issues, Greg? What do you think that's all about? Social issues erupt into criminal justice issues.
Like racial profiling.
Yeah, these minor things where I might start to hear some of this stuff. Hey, I noticed that, I look at your log, Chief, and I see a lot of X. I look in the log and I see a lot of Y. Or I've seen that this has happened. Or, I've been reading about this, dealing with the mentally ill. And I can tell you, my mother was a schizophrenic. And let me tell you a thing or two about the way that you need to do this. Let me tell you the way things went wrong when somebody came to my house and dealt with my mother that has Alzheimer's. Let me tell you what it's like to communicate every day with someone that's got emotional problems and doesn't process information the way you do, Chief. That's the type of stuff that I can take from and I can go back to the station and practically apply. I might say, yeah, it's been a while since we've done anything about that, dealing with the emotional disturbed person. It's been a little bit of a while. I need to dust that policy off, look into it, get with the sergeants and see when the last time we've done a roll call training about that. Are we adhering to our policy? It's been a while since I looked at it. I think I'm gonna scratch that surface a little bit. And I want to look at how her issue went down that she's talking about because that bothers me a little bit. Half the time, it didn't go down that way. It's just that's the way that it works, and I don't take much from it. But a lot of times, I really will change the way we do business. And at the very least, gets me talking and thinking about a societal issue that could be coming to a theater near you, right? Huge, huge issue. So it's a good way of assessing my success. How do you measure success at a police department? How does that measurement happen? And how it happens at Apple. How many widgets do you sell? So can I apply that to my department? How many tickets you write? I hired a couple really hard charges this time around, over this last year. And I can tell you in no uncertain terms, I'm going to see a significant bump in my traffic enforcement numbers. that do not correlate at all to an increased problem with traffic in the town of Hollis. Now, I can lie and say it does, and we all know the politicians that do. Listen to how the current administration will spin debt reduction. Yeah, it's the largest debt reduction in history because they had that one year that was the largest spending in history. So us reducing spending that'd be like me building a police station one year, not doing it the next year and saying, look, I saved you $2 million. I spent $2 million less this year than I did last year. I mean, I'm the man, right? $2 million. Yeah, because you built a $2 million station last year, you're not doing it this year, right? Lies figures lie, that kind of stuff, right? But how do you measure the effectiveness of the police department? How do you do that? I can't quantify it. Now, I know if you work town of Hollis and you don't write tickets for a week, and you're patrolling the same roads I patrolled, and I'm looking and I'm seeing and I'm looking at Joe, he's out there and he's doing the same job he always did, and when I put him over there, he writes the same tickets that everybody else ever wrote when that worked that jurisdiction. What are you doing? Let's talk about your patrol patterns, because something's amiss here. There's a level of crime and disorder that happens that we can kind of gauge over periods of time. But how do I measure the success? I can't quantify it. It's qualitative, right? It's not quantitative. It's not all quantitative. I can get it right here. Some departments have gotten real creative and started to bring iPads with them that they can say, hey, do you mind taking a quick little survey? You know, when's the last time you talked to a Jefferson City Police Department? Now, how did that interaction go? Was it about, what was it about? Was it about crime? Was it about social service? Were you looking for this? Were you looking for that? And you can conduct these informal surveys and take that data back, and I can and provide that to the movers and shakers to define, assess that the quality of the department, right? Because it's not something that's easy to define. It's not. One of Sir Robert Peel's other principles is it's not necessarily a sign of officers dealing with problems that show you an effective police department. It's the lack of crime and disorder. But you can't measure the negative. Now, does Hollis have low crime because they're just great people and our department's lucky enough that we are in town that has low crime? Or do they have low crime because the department's fairly effective at combating crime? I cannot measure the negative. The one kid that I used to grab up all the time after baseball practice and say, where are you headed? So what's up tonight? What's up tonight? I know your mom's gone. What's up? You heading over to your dad's? He's in Litchfield? What's the deal? Oh, my big brother. Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea, Jeff. I don't. Maybe he didn't commit a crime he otherwise would, right? So do I want that statistic so I can say, yeah, I need more stuff? Or am I successful in the fact that I don't have a juvenile delinquent that later on would turn, because once that first felony happens, poverty's there, right? Felons live in poverty. Almost an absolute fact, right? So again, it's a great way to survey my department, but also I might start to identify that, we do not have a lot of social services for mental health issues around. Boy, oh boy, I need to get a better handle on what we've got available in the southern part of the state here, because I find that question coming up a lot. You know something? I don't have a lot of answers. NAMI, fantastic organization. I use them a ton for resources for mental illness and for those related issues. But the point is that I might start to see what social service deficits there are in the town, in our area. You've probably all heard about the laws changes to juvenile delinquency and juvenile petitions over the past couple of years. They've restored funding to a great deal of the system, but boy, oh boy, were my ears on fire during that period of time about that issue. My kid has got to commit a crime before I can get any services. Does that make any sense at all? Is that in keeping with the mission of our justice system, that he's actually got to do something? And truth be told, when all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. I'll get you the services, but you ever hear the labeling theory? And what did I just say about felons and their general outlook in life? Not very good. So again, as a state, we're making a policy declaration when it comes to that kind of stuff, but my ears were burning. And I was right up at the State House asking for the funding to be restored to several things, and as I think you can figure out, I'm not exactly the most spendthrift guy. And obviously the key thing here is it's my opportunity to sell my department and what we already offer. We have a ton of programs that I need to outreach and get out there, but I'm not always reaching that target demographic, right? And whether or not it be elderly, whether or not it be somebody that has somebody in the home that needs a special assistance, all kinds of different programs we offer, but they're not worth a darn if I'm not targeting them to the right people, right? So the big one, the chicken and the egg, right? Does your department stink because it doesn't have resources? Right? Or does your department stink, therefore they don't give you resources? Where are you at? Right? How does it work? Well, they suck. Why would I give them money? Well, they suck because you wouldn't give them any money. Oh, right? I don't want to be in there. I want support for the initiatives that we do. I want funding for those initiatives, and I want buy-in from the community. I want to mold that consensus that we need to allocate resources in these areas, right? So some of the community policing initiatives that we have in our town is I do have an SRO, fantastic one-man community policing machine. He's unbelievable, great guy. In fact, I'm giving him an award Monday night at the Board of Selectmen's meeting for his community policing initiatives. I'm trying to get his wife to go with his kids and make a big deal of it, so I hope he, great guy. We have a DARE program, we have a senior call-in program. There's a certain list of seniors that will call in every day that are elderly, still living in their homes. It's unbelievable the amount of stuff that we've helped in this regard. Very, very social service oriented, but very good, very good. We have a CARE program, which is a registration program where you can register a child with autism, an elderly person with Alzheimer's, and give us all those vital information that we'll need as first responders to deal with someone like that. They don't like lights and sirens, it will freak them out. She loves water, so I'm telling you right now, she's going to be down at Rocky Pond, those types of things, maybe a photograph, how to deal or how not to deal with people. This is a very popular program. We put it out every year to our special needs teachers and coordinators in all the schools, and we populate the list once a year. It's a very, very good program. Our rape and assault defense program, largely taken by women. We have an identity theft prevention events a number of times a year where we'll present things in front of seniors to talk about identity theft, how to protect yourself from it. We have an annual shred day at the police department where some gigantic truck comes in and you can bring boxes full of all those bills that you leave on the counter. Don't say you don't, or at least you probably don't. Maybe you're more organized than me. My wife's always on me, my whole bills, and I pay it online. I don't even need the paper statement anymore, but why I save it, I'll never know. But we have that once a year, so you can come and throw all your stuff into a giant shred machine. All we ask is that you bring a canned good. We do it as a big food drive. That's how we get the shred people to come out for free. We have a bunch of seminars that we offer to the small convenience stores and some of the residential people in town that prevent burglary. The other thing we'll do is we'll talk with landscape companies, construction companies, how to kind of safeguard their stuff at night, those types of things. And we have a bunch of different specialty units that we utilize in the summer. We have a state park in town and a bunch of conservation land, that kind of stuff. So some of our swag, this guy with the fresh haircut. I'm thinking if I keep cutting my hair fresh, people won't notice that I'm bald, but it's not working. I'll keep giving it the college try, but it's not working. So what we do sometimes is we merge some of these events with our Coffee with a Cop. Here we had a town, our annual Old Home Day celebration in town. It's a big to-do down there. So we set up a Coffee with a Cop. At the same time, we had one of these little driving simulators over here. The Convincer, it's called, over here, where it's an apparatus where you sit on this seat and you put a seatbelt on it. It simulates a crash at 20 miles an hour, and it'll take the fillings out of your teeth. And it's ridiculous when you see how much of an impact you get at 20 miles an hour, and it'll convince you to wear your seatbelt. That's why they call it the Convincer. And we put the little car over there so the kids can climb all through it and see everything and get all snazzy. And there's a little girl doing it up here. But that's a very popular event once a year. The local farm stand donates all the stuff for us and works out pretty good. And this is a picture of my shred day. Our coffee set up in the in the bay of the police station. Here's the canned goods that we got, and here's my beautiful daughter, Emily, right over here. Hair's a mess, but it's all right. Just got a little sticker there. And this is Tyler. He's one of the officer's sons. He's not drinking coffee, which is good, because he's already off the wall. Emily was in charge of him all day. That was nuts. And here's the guy with the fresh haircut talking to one of the town residents. So, pretty simple concept. It really is. I mean, I'm not a smart guy. It's simple. It's all been done before. And there it is. It's police and community members coming together, a formal, neutral space to discuss community policing. It's community issues as general, right? It's my job to determine whether or not they're policing issues, social service issues, policing issues, that type of thing. But building relationships, it's critical. People that look at the town of Hollis, the police department, the school board, as they, as this gigantic entity and not a system of relationships over time, I think make a huge mistake in that regard. Running a police department effectively absolutely mandates good relationships with your town. You have to know the town. They consent to being governed that way. They consent to me policing their community. That's kind of the way that it works. And this kind of program, I think, brings it all together pretty well. One of the things you will see kind of nationally We did it monthly for a long time, for probably a good 6 months, I bet. And we've changed to a quarterly schedule where we do it once every, I think it's actually every 3 months. Is that quarterly, or is it? Yeah. And we do it every 3 months. The next one's in January, and I think we did one in November. So they're popular. We move them around town. We've done them at farm stands. We've done them at the local Dunkin' Donuts. Done them at a oil company. We've done them at town hall. We've done them at our police station. We've kind of moved them all around. Convenience store, I think, is next in January, if I'm not mistaken. So, what do you got? Any questions? Any feedback? Anything to take away from the program?
How many other towns in New Hampshire are doing this?
There's actually a website. I don't know if we have internet here. There's actually a website, coffeewithacop.org, I think. Hawthorne Police Department that started it actually was very successful in it. Got enormously successful out in California, and they actually got some grant money to provide education to other departments on how to run them. They give you a little kind of workbook and kind of a toolbox where, hey, this is a good cover letter. This is how we should advertise. Hey, don't do this. We tried that. Didn't work. That kind of stuff. So it's spread out around pretty good. So there's actually a website. I think it is coffeewithacop.org, but I don't remember. And you can plug your town in, and it will show you whether or not, one, your town has it. And if it is, they register all the events there and or the closest one to you. I know
You just said town, so what's the population of Falls?
10,000?
Okay, so is this more of a small town thing?
No, definitely, absolutely not. No, I know Hudson, New Hampshire does them. Portsmouth does one. I think Manchester does it. I mean, yeah, it's a.
Concord?
I'm not sure. Brad Osgood, the chief of police in Concord, is an adjunct at NHTI as well. So I'm not sure. I've never looked. There was a whole. I couldn't even begin to tell you the amount of towns in New Hampshire. It was a lot. It was a lot more than you would think. It was in the 20s. I'll bet anyway. Portsmouth actually kind of took a spin on it. And the chief out there, he recently retired, Lou Ferland was his name. He actually would, one day a week, would have lunch on Main Street. Would advertise where he's going to have lunch. And he just came in and had lunch with them. They'd sit at the bar or sit at the table, and that everybody was welcome to kind of come talk to him. Very, very kind of similar take to the Coffee with a Cop thing. It was his way of kind of giving back. An old school kind of detective guy, one of those gumshoe guys that did a lot of walking in Portsmouth over the years. But yeah, a lot of departments happens. Very, very popular, extremely popular in California. Extremely popular. Very good program. Our success rate's been very, very high. I didn't know whether or not we'd sustain the numbers we did the first couple of times, where we'd have 40, 50, 60, 80 people in and out in a 2-hour period. We really tapped we basically packed the Dunkin' Donuts to a point where I didn't think we could have it there anymore. We did it, the next one we did was at the town hall in the community room. I think the occupancy is 200, and it still seemed like it was fairly well attended. It's very steady. If you do it right, it is very steady. We have found that advertising does pull people in, which is kind of nice too, because we'll get the ones where I've been meaning to tell you this. Oh my gosh, I really wish you would have called Wednesday night. So in addition to the spontaneity ones that are very, very valuable, I wish I would have called kind of people do happen in as well. And so I've met a ton of people through the process that I didn't know in the town halls, talked about all kinds of different things. I found it to be very, very valuable. We'll continue to do it as long as we get that level of support.
I'm sort of asking this question from the perspective of social service organizations. I'm the president of Lakes Region Community Services, and we handle a bunch of communities, basically from Alton to Wentworth, with Meredith and Laconia kind of in the middle. And we deal largely with people with developmental disabilities and acquired brain disorders. One of the issues we have is what happens when either police or fire are called in to a home or residence, what have you, when you have individuals who have various disabilities. What we have tried to do is to, educate the police and the fire and vice versa. We do fire drills, we do police drills, we have police come back and forth, and I believe there's a 911, there's something that we're working on now to get, when people call 911, that particular residence, it comes up on the screen that this is a resident that has individuals who may have even wheelchairs or what have you. I don't know if there's any way to integrate the social service organizations with police work in a formal way.
I mean, I think I was talking to one of the students prior to the seminar, or prior to the presentation. And we were talking about the CJ bubble in umbrella is humongous, and collaboration underneath that umbrella is really what it's all about. And the fact of the matter is in doing this job, if you don't have a higher level of understanding of the social service availability in your community, in your greater community, you're not doing your job very well. Half of our job is bridging that gap between police service and social service, and understanding that this is not truly a police issue yet, but I can provide you with some help in that regard. The GREAT program, I mean, the CARE program is integral in the sense that at our department, we integrate that in our local system as well. So if our dispatch receives a call from one of these residents, they're informed right away that there is a CARE resident at that location. And there are some specific instructions we give dispatchers to provide the officer to have a specific and very unique response to that address based on the specific and individual needs of that special person. Because again, as we know from education, individual education plans aren't just created, right? There's a specific reason why we do that, is because one person that suffers from an illness reacts differently than another person that suffers from the same illness. And the only way, I go back to my goofy analogy about the little kid that lives in a mansion, the only way I'll know how to deal with Freddie is talking to people that deal with Freddie. And my primary objective is not to lock Freddie up and bring him to a jail where he can get substandard medical care. I can make that happen, certainly, because I know how I can make him flip out. That's, whoa, time out. That's not what we need. So my recommendation, if you have those same repeat departments, is turn them on to the CARE program. It's very similar to what you see very widespread in Canada called an autism registration programs. And when you talk registration programs in New Hampshire, you got to be very careful. You got to make it known first that you're a good old boy from New Hampshire before you even start the discussion about registry programs. Right? So it's good to lay down those conservative credentials right away before you start laying on the registry programs. We have privacy concerns about that. Do we want that over the scanner? I've got some logistical information that I could provide somebody that was looking to kick that program off that dealt with some of those concerns from some people, which are valid. I mean, you got little Johnny who's 14 or 15. I don't want his information blasted over scanner land about what his pet peeves are and that kind of thing. So there are appropriate responses in those areas, but it's a program that's gained some steam. Very difficult in the bigger communities, obviously, for obvious reasons. But in some of these regional dispatch centers like we run a dispatch center for 3 different communities, Mason, Brookline, and Hollis, and we have that registration program available to each, and we collaborate with those departments to make sure that we have those communication techniques available. And we can make a phone call instead of putting it out over the air. There's things we can do to mitigate some of those issues. I saw some questions here.
Yeah, that was, you sort of segued into the question I wanted to ask was issues and information that you've learned don't stop at the town line. And so how do you share or work with other towns in New Hampshire, but also you're close to Massachusetts. So how do you interface with law enforcement in Massachusetts? Do you share back and forth, or?
You know, it's funny, the law enforcement thing we've had down for a while. The law enforcement thing has been made a lot easier over time due to the fact that we've got some advancements in technology to make that process a lot easier. And we have a variety of different investigator associations. We have county task force for burglary. We have centralized gathering of pawn slips. I mean, there's intelligence data, and the sharing of crime information has really been, I don't want to say perfected, but a lot better than it was when I was coming up. I can tell you that. The sharing of social service information, on the other hand, is where I see the deficit. You're right, we border Pepperell, Massachusetts. We deal with families from Pepperell, Massachusetts all the time. I don't know how that process even begins to work in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So what we have done or tried to bridge that gap is to try and connect with the community service officers in that community so that we can kind of get a better understanding of where to point them in the right direction. Like I know firsthand we have open lines of communication to their senior center down there, which is provides us a lot of information for social services. And on the youth side, they do have an SRO down there as well, and our SRO and their SRO meet fairly regularly to kind of deal with that. But policing is a regional endeavor. There's no question about that. And in many instances, it's a national endeavor. And the terrorists that bombed on 9/11 flew through Portland, Maine airport. Portland, Maine. What? Drove right down 95, right through Newington, like they own the place, right? So it's a national endeavor when you think of it that way too. So keeping that information to yourself is never useful. It doesn't make any sense. But you have to learn how to get it to where it needs to go and not just throw it out there in the air for everybody to consume. So I think from the investigative standpoint, it's pretty squared away, and it's very easy, and it's been done for a long time. But our understanding of where we fit on the social service side of things is, I think, what we're still molding, truth be told. And that is, I think, is a deficit. And being the only place that will automatically answer the phone no matter what time it is, we get stuck with that kind of stuff a lot. So knowing that information is what we need to do. All right, well, I'll stick around for a little bit if anybody has any, oh, I'm sorry.
Just gonna throw it out, elephant in the room,
Sure.
Ferguson. One of your first slides was what are the biggest issues facing law enforcement in 2015? How does the national issue of Ferguson and policing relate to you?
It impacts, I think, local law enforcement in a number of different ways, and one is the trust issue. I think it begets this national narrative that there's a mistrust and a distrust between the populace and their police. And it's a very specific endeavor. I don't know much about Ferguson, Missouri. Heck, I'm not even sure I knew Ferguson, Missouri existed before the officer was involved in that shooting. So I don't know the specific things that take place between their department and their constituency and whether or not they adhere to some of Robert Peel's principles or not. I can say that I think it's, in a lot of ways, is a result of our divide and conquer politics that we have on a national level, where we want this issue to be shoehorned to speak to a larger narrative that we'd really like to talk about. So we need some way to talk about this issue. Oh, this just happened. Oh, let's look. Nah, it doesn't really fit. We don't do that anymore. It fits, no matter what. I look back at the OJ thing, and it's the same thing, really. It's very similar to the OJ Simpson verdict after and the cry for justice prior to. There's a thought process amongst detectives, and I've been in investigative schools, evidence collection and gathering, where they'll tell you at the beginning of the seminar, if you think OJ didn't do it, you need to leave the room. Because you can't do this job. But yet you still had thousands and hundreds of thousands of people, unbelievably happy that OJ was acquitted for cutting some lady's head off. That's a major disconnect, where you have a vast majority of 99.9% of the people that are in law enforcement that do this for a living telling you the evidence speaks to one thing, but we want it to fit a larger narrative. It speaks to a larger issue, I think, about race relations, quite honestly. I feel bad for the officer involved. I really do. I don't understand how he is resigned and just goes off into the sunset. I'm not sure what that poor guy does for a living. I know he probably packed his lunch like any other 25-year-old patrolman, hoping that he'd come home that day. I look at the presentation by the prosecutor involved, and when you can't get to a point where you can even get probable cause something happened, boy, I'll tell you, it's not hard to convince 12 people that something probably happened. And then we get down to a fact as, I'm not even sure it should have went to the grand jury. I think it went to the grand jury for political reasons. And because of that, I worry sometimes about whether or not an officer in my community might have an interruption in thought process when dealing with an African American that'll kill him. Because you cannot think of anything else other than the facts and circumstances that present themselves at that time. And if you have a hiccup in your thought process that, ooh, am I going to get in trouble with something, or ooh, am I going to say something that's going to offend somebody, you could be killed. So it affects my department in a variety of ways. It affects our business in a variety of ways. It affects the use of force and the concepts of use of force in a variety of ways. I think there will be some good that comes out of it in the sense that we will look at those policies and procedures at a deeper level, and I think that's always healthy. I just don't want it to fit a narrative that might not exist. But the use of force in particular is troubling. There was a case I think I showed in Greg's latest class he took with me about a deputy named Dinkeller. Deputy Dinkeller, he was killed in the line of duty. And the video is horrifying. It is one of those things you probably have to warn before you show for triggers. I mean, it's ridiculously brutal, but I think it's appropriate in a law enforcement setting. Obviously, it's particularly with CJ students. But one of the things that came out as an after-action report after was that county sheriff's department was very aggressive in dealing with complaints made against officers about being rude and being discourteous. And they would go to the nth degree of bringing guys in and giving the business about being rude to constituents. And the unintended consequence in that was he needed to get to business fast, and he needed to dispense with the yes sir and no sir stuff because he was fixing to get shot by a Vietnam veteran that knew how to do it. And he sat there, and you can watch it yourself for 3 or 4 minutes, him talking to this guy like he's not complying about getting his driver's license as he's loading a shotgun. So if there's that interruption in thought process, then that case might have been that there had been the way that the department handles cases has got into his mind, rather than dealing with what danger he was actually in or could have been in. That interruption in thought process, in my view, could have cost him his life. I hate to think that that could take place on a wider level, that there might be a difference between the way a police officer handles his interaction with an African American than he does with a white man. You cannot police that way. It's a major problem. So I think it affects law enforcement and shakes the issue to the core. It really does.
Can I ask a second question?
Sure.
I guess police mistrust is definitely something to be talked about nationwide.
Absolutely.
I will tell you that I am terrified of police. I will not ask police for help if I need to, and I am white and I am privileged. How do you deal with minorities or that have mistrust and that will not come to you?
Yeah, it's certainly not a minority issue alone, to be quite honest. Again, I grew up in a housing project. I know full well the way some families and some people viewed police and continue to view police, and that's an incubator. And the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I'm the one who puts stuff in my son's head, right? I'm the one who frames national issues. I'm the one that frames right and wrong for my son and my daughter, right? I am. That's my job. So I understand full well that it's not limited just to minorities. That's one thing. Particularly immigrants are in that class as well, impoverished people, and there's all kinds of, if you've only seen police when they're arresting your father, boy, I tell you, that can leave a lasting mark, there's no question. I think that we get better by going back and look at these principles and saying, where did we go wrong? I heard a statistic that was troubling about Ferguson the other day, that it's 67% black and its department is 95% white, I believe. I can't remember the exact statistic. If we had the internet, I'd ask somebody to stream and try and see if I could get that figure for me. But then I look and say, well, what did Robert Peel say about that? Did he make any comment about that? Yeah, he did. Why aren't we effective in Afghanistan and Iraq? Because we're an occupying army. That's why. That's not consent of the governed, right? That's not. I'm from New Hampshire, man. I don't want somebody telling me what to do. I don't, right? Are you kidding me? I'm an adult. I can make my own way. My refrigerator is stocked, and I don't need you telling me how to do it. I don't. So if you think of things that way, and you look at this and you say, well, wait a second, the police are the public and the public are the police. How is that possible in a situation where you have 4% of your department is of the ethnic persuasion of your populace? You turn into an occupying army, right? Why is it hard to get buy-in in a housing project? None of those guys live in that project, and they probably don't view it as their community. They view it like they're doing their tour in Afghanistan. And that is, I think, the root of a lot of those problems, is the violation, and the numbers are accurate if you wanted to look it up, the 7th principle in Robert Peel's, but I think it's more than that too. I think we can extrapolate all these principles out of there. But I think mistrust is born of a lot of these different things. Are we cooperative with our populace? Do we really have their public approval of doing the things we're doing? You don't in a housing project. Why can't we get intelligence about dealing drugs in the housing project? That's how they feed their families. You think a 12-year-old kid's going to tell you about drug dealing when that's how we put food on the table? No. There is no public approval in that housing project for our initiatives when it comes to stopping drug dealing, is there? No. That's why we're not successful, right? You got to get that buy-in. It's not a question. I don't mean to make you wait.
So the other side of that coin, talking, well, only 4% comes from that community. How would you balance that with having a community where, I'm trying to figure out the kindest way to state this, where if you want people from that project, if no one from that project is eligible, is able to, either of a physical or good moral character or an education background, able to make their way into an organization, because Ferguson, if they could have a 50-50 split, they couldn't be happier. But to have an organization where only 4% were able to even get through.
Yeah, and I want to throw it out there that I'm really not sure of those numbers, but it's very close.
Yes.
It was in the 70s and 90s or some goofy thing like that. But yeah, I'm following you.
You can't have an equal distribution.
You're not ever gonna. That's utopia. We would think that, I read in a recent thing that there's 56% of our population is female. So does that mean my department needs to be 56% female? Because conversely, doesn't that mean 44% of kindergarten teachers are going to be male? No. Why aren't 46% of the population of kindergarten and preschool teachers going to be male?
Not gonna have that many
Because
people.
don't want to do it. I had my time of chasing a 4-year-old. I have, but I'm done. No mas after 2. I don't know how you guys did it if you had more than 2 kids. I don't know how. I don't. It was work enough, right? Because there are preferences and abilities involved. I don't think you're ever going to get there, and that's no way to measure it. I don't think it's a quantifiable thing. I think it is a sign of something's wrong, because that doesn't make a lot of sense that this is here. And there are social conditions, I think, that got us to this place where we have the need to deal drugs to put food on the table. There's social issues that the police department's not going to have any influence on that are going to cause things society-wide that we're not going to be able to solve. There's no doubt about that. And I don't think you're ever going to get there. I do think you need to have an authentic, well-meaning approach, or authentic, legitimate attempt to try and incorporate the townspeople into the mix as to who the police are, because you cannot have that setup where it's an occupying army. You cannot have your police officers living in Brentwood, California, and going into the hood and patrolling and thinking you're going to get anything done. It's just it's shown itself over time not to be effective. There are national programs to combat that. There's housing programs where you can get a lower interest mortgage rate by moving into one of these communities. This has been thought of before. Again, I'm not smart, so somebody else already thought of that. But you're never going to get perfect. You're never going to see 56% of police departments female. It's not going to happen. You're never going to see 90% of NBA teams white either, right? I mean, there are realities in our world that we're not going to change. But it doesn't take away from the fact I think we can do a better job as an industry and as a profession of working on that mistrust. We can, and I think the answer is here. I think you need to take a fundamental look at what drives us and what our major objectives are as police officers and police departments, rather than this thought process of the military approach to things, because that's not what it works. We do not have a national police force. And when I hear the current administration talking about a police czar, it makes me nervous. We don't have a national police force for a reason. When's the last time you called Washington to get something done for you? What will happen when you call Washington to get something done for you? Right? I can tell you, I don't care what city you live in the state of New Hampshire, if you want to meet the chief of police, you'll meet the chief of police. I will guarantee you, it's not a problem. If you want to talk to Chief Maher of the Manchester Police Department, I will guarantee you he will entertain your phone call at some point. Guaranteed. And if he doesn't, when the police commission meetings happen, I think every other Tuesday in the city of Manchester, if they still do, show up, stand in front of that microphone and give them the business.